Now, remember, we talked about the Thomas Castellanos thing. So he's not playing for BC. They're changing quarterbacks going into this SMU game. SMU trying to stay undefeated in the ACC. But SMU coach Rhett Lashlee came out this week and said, hey, there's a brand bias against the ACC. Let's watch that clip.
On behalf of the ACC, I think it is interesting. Yeah, there's normal brand biases for teams. I'm not really going to get into that, but there's conference biases. And I think it's interesting that, you look at the ACC, we have a winning record against the Big Ten this year. We have a winning record against the Big 12 this year. We don't have a winning record against the SEC, but we have 4 games left, and if we win enough of those, we would have a winning record. So that's still up in the air. It's been competitive. And, so to look at our league and say, well, we may be a one-bid league, but you look at another league that we have a winning record against and say, oh, they're going to get 4 in. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It needs to make it make sense. When other leagues beat each other up internally, they're considered a deep, solid league. When we beat up internally, we're considered a weak league. When Kentucky goes and beats Ole Miss, when Arkansas goes and beats Tennessee, when South Carolina goes and beats A&M, when Vandy beats Alabama, that's considered a deep league. When Georgia Tech beats Miami, right? When Louisville goes on the road and beats Clemson, when UVA goes on the road and beats Pitt, we're not considered a deep league. I think we're a pretty deep league. And so I just want our league to get the same respect that everyone else gets. And, I think we have at least 2, probably 3 or 4 teams still that should be very well considered for the college football playoff in this league. And it shouldn't be any different than the Big 10 or the Big 12. Same thing, Big 12, if I'm them, I'm upset too. I'm like, hold on, we got an make it make sense. And when the data and the metrics say it should, I think that's the biggest thing. I think our league has earned the right to be in the conversation. It's insulting to say, oh, it's a one big league probably, maybe 2, yet we've got another league that the metrics don't add up any better. As a matter of fact, worse, and we're acting like they just got 4 and it's done. Make it make sense.
I got a lot of thoughts here, Andy. Do you want to hear them or do you want to go first?
I just want to say one thing, and I'm going to let you cook.
That's what I was going to say. So that comment we put up.
Rhett Lashlee's been in the ACC for like 3 months. He's already better at PR and presenting the ACC's case than the ACC has been for the last 10 years.
That's not what I was going to say.
But go ahead.
I was going to say that it's amusing to me that SMU has been dying for years and years and years to get into a Power 5, Power 4, Power Conference. And in year 1 of his existence, they're finding out right now that like SMU would probably have every bit as much of an opportunity to make the playoff now as they would last year. If the 12-team field existed last year, because if SMU was beating the crap out of teams, they might not have. They would have still had their non-conference game against BYU, so they still might have a loss, but they would be right next to Boise in their race, right, to be the 12th seed. So it is funny, but the only difference between being in the conference that he's in now and being a group of 5 is that he can definitively say that SMU controls their own destiny. Like, he has full power to get there. Now, the thing that I wrote, and I think he has a point, and he said this after I wrote this column for On 3 on what's today? Thursday? On Wednesday, is that it doesn't make sense, the inconsistency in which 2 teams in the same conference are ranked. Like, it does not make sense to me that Miami is 9 and SMU is 14 when you stack the resumes side by side. Same league, same best win. The strength of schedules are fairly similar, and SMU has a loss to a better team, a better loss. Like, losing to BYU is a better loss than losing to Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech's a much different team now with Haynes King, but still, I think it's a better, more quality loss, especially if we're using the committee's rankings that they put together themselves. They will tell you, because they have ranked it this way, that losing to BYU, who's a top 10 team, is a better loss than losing to Georgia Tech. It's not a debate. And you have one team that's firmly in the playoff right now, and you have one team that's out of it if the season ended today. Now, SMU is lucky because it doesn't matter. SMU could be ranked 100th or they could be ranked number 1. Their path to the field is the same regardless of their ranking. But it does not. The thing that bothers me the most about the College Football Playoff Committee is that they use protocol for some and they rank on feeling for others. And if you want to just rank the teams 1 through 12 based on who you think is the best team, based on your feeling and your ability to watch the games and come up with it, then you have to rank everybody that way. But the thing that frustrates me, Andy, is that some people who have the protocol and the quality wins and the things that they can use to weaponize their ranking or to explain the ranking are ranked based on their accomplishments. And then other teams are just ranked based on feeling in the same poll, and then it becomes inconsistent. And that's why my mind explodes. So, like, Miami is ahead 5 spots of SMU in the poll right now because the committee feels like they're better.
Right. Because
but I have
reasons.
a buddy.
Right.
Yeah. And like, if Ward Manuel's explanation for this was reasons, it was feeling. We felt. So then don't fall back on the protocol for other teams if that's your explanation for why they're ranked where they are. Why did you rank SMU and Miami differently than you ranked other teams that have better metrics? It doesn't make any sense to me. So, like, that to me is the number one thing. It's the inconsistency of how the rankings are done. And I guess the bottom line is they're just going to do whatever they want, and then they'll explain it away however they see fit. But it just doesn't make sense.
No, I'm with you. I understand that. And there
because
was
Andy, sorry, just let me just do this one last thing.
Okay, go ahead. Keep cooking, man. Keep cooking.
Miami fell less in the polls after a loss to Georgia Tech than Georgia fell in the polls after losing. So, I'm glad you brought this up. So when you're talking about brand bias, like, the actual committee's actions have been unfavorable to SMU, but Miami was treated very favorably. So is it actually an ACC issue, or is SMU's brand the problem?
Because I don't even think it's SMU. Is that because Georgia's brand, we can all agree, is stronger than SMU's brand, but so you just brought up Miami and Georgia. So I had a question in my mailbag column from Sean in Dallas, and it was a great question. He said in the first EFP rankings, the committee had Georgia ranked 1 spot ahead of Miami. Then both teams lost a game, Georgia to a ranked opponent and Miami to an unranked opponent. Georgia was on the road. Miami was also on the road. Now they have Miami ranked 3 spots ahead of Georgia. What am I missing? Well, somebody did ask Ward Manuel about that on Tuesday night in the conference call. Shall I do a dramatic reading of his answer? Are you ready?
Yes, but I think I have an explanation for it. But go ahead.
Oh, this is let's hear the answer first. Let's hear it from the guy himself. Well, the obvious is the first loss for Miami and the second loss for Georgia. That obviously played a factor into it. Georgia Tech is coming on. They now have both their quarterbacks playing the game. They were on the road. Georgia's losses were both on the road as well. So it came down to factoring in those games. A close game that Miami lost to Georgia Tech, and then a decisive win by Ole Miss against Georgia away. So we just factored everything in and took a look at the competitiveness. Both teams are very good from our perspective, but based on the season as well as how they did last week, that's how we made a judgment of how they fell. Georgia, obviously, with 2 losses, having lost both to Alabama and Ole Miss, both with 2 losses, they obviously, in the mind of the committee, Alabama and Ole Miss were going to be ahead of Georgia because of the head-to-head and the similar record. Did that answer anything?
Well, that's the thing. I actually wrote a column for The Athletic 5 years ago. And you know what I thought? And the premise of the column was this, is that Ward Manuel has a very difficult job. So, like, I do not love piling on the committee chair who has to speak for an entire room of people on decisions that he himself may not agree with. Like, it's a very difficult situation. Like,
we don't know how Ward Manuel actually thinks about this. And there's probably part of the committee that was like, no, we can't actually put Georgia below Miami, but then another part's like, no, we need to.
Yeah, and like, I don't know what it would be like because of my temperament, but there's no way that I would effectively be able to argue something I don't believe. Like, that would be hard for me. So, like, I do know that, like, when you get on TV or you get on a conference call with very smart reporters who have all the numbers and the math in front of them, who are asking you questions designed to trip you up, that you like, the only thing that you can do is be vague and to say whatever gets you to the next question. So, like, I have a great appreciation for the situation that Ward Manuel is in. That said, this is also part of the job. And, like, I do not understand why we have to live in a world where there is no transparency of what is actually taking place. Like, why can't Ward Manuel say, well, actually, half the room had no idea what to do with Miami and Georgia. We had to make
I would love that.
decisions. And like, honestly speaking, we really need more context in the next few weeks to help us navigate that. I would be able to accept that because that's what we're all doing anyway, right? We're all looking for more games, more results, more context. Like that's the thing. Like, you might not know right now. Like, we don't know if Indiana's going to play with Ohio State. Indiana might beat Ohio State, but we'll know more when they get to play. So what's wrong with saying, I don't know, or we were conflicted, or this was a point of contention? There's no transparency in what we're given as reporters to questions of things that don't make sense are nonsensical answers that are supposed to explain something when in fact it just makes it more nonsensical. We understand how the sport works, Andy. We know that there are certain things that are happening in college football right now in the rankings that are just impossible to navigate. Like, it's hard. I do the rankings every Saturday myself. It's very difficult. And there's no way that you can do a set of rankings without screwing somebody or making a wrong move or irritating somebody. That's part of it. But just be a human. Don't talk to me like you're the BCS machine incarnated into a human.
I'm with you. I want to go back to what Rhett Lashlee said, and I want to ask you, it's kind of a devil's advocate question, because I do tend to agree with Rhett Lashlee on this. But does it hurt the ACC at all that SMU can come from the American and dog walk the entire conference?
Yeah, he probably doesn't want to say that because then it just like nags his own team. But like, we have to have the reality of that, right? Which is, you have a team that is not even taking the entire financial windfall that comes with joining the conference. In fact, they're paying, who is supposed to be a tier lower. And like, the actual truth is, this isn't just happening in the ACC. You've got new teams in the Big 12 that are doing the same thing, right? Like,
yeah, but the difference is that the teams that came from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 were in a fairly similar revenue situation, like fairly similar competitive situation. In fact, probably more competitive because they had Oregon and Washington and USC. Like that, they're not moving up or down a level of they're not really moving a level of competition. They're kind of moving over.
Who's in first place?
SMU's moving up.
Who's in the first place in the Big 12?
Colorado.
BYU's in first.
BYU. I'm sorry. Yes, they were moving up. You're right. Okay, yes. You're right.
Yeah. So,
you're right.
Like, I agree. Like, Colorado to the Big 12 from the Pac-12 is not the same thing as ACC team moving or an American team moving to the ACC. Like, I understand that point, but the point is that our perception has always been that the lower level teams can't, like, remember what the number one argument, Andy, was always for the lower level teams, like in the 14 field on the BCS, it was that, well, yeah, they could on any given day beat one of them, but they can't do it playing them week in and week out.
The grind of a power conference schedule.
They can't do that. And it's like, to watch them come in and it's a different era. It's a different era. But like, yeah, I mean, SMU this isn't a fluke. They're better than the teams they're beating. So, but like, that's the thing. Like, Rhett Lashlee has to also acknowledge the world that we live in, because he roped the Big 12 into it too. But the Big 12 lost the two anchors of their conference that propped it up in national contention. With Texas and Oklahoma, and when they're good especially, they either win the conference and are taken seriously at a national level, or the team that wins the conference beats those teams along the way to win it. And that automatically legitimizes your school or your conference if you're able to win that on the way. But the ACC is probably in a better scenario than the Big 12, because the ACC still has Miami, Clemson, and, you know, teams that have that brand. But like the Big 12, I don't feel bad for. They don't have anybody left to. I mean, the only way to do this is to win your games, and the Big 12 is playing out exactly the way that we knew it would, which is 3 or 8 teams within 2 losses of each other.
Yeah, and if it's one bid league, it's one bid league. At least you get one in.
But do you think the ACC
playoff? You begin 0.
Do you think the ACC should be a 2-bid league?
Right now, no.
Also, if Clemson beat Georgia or played them to 3 points, then maybe it wouldn't be.
Correct. And as Rhett Lashlee says, there are some games left over where the ACC could take the lead on the season series on the SEC. But do we think that's going to happen well, I mean, maybe Georgia Tech could beat Georgia. Florida State, I wouldn't put a lot of faith in, even though Florida's not that good. Louisville's got to prove it can beat Kentucky. I need to see that.
And tinfoil hat, guys. Let's put it on real quick. Put it on with me. And I've been thinking about this, but SMU wins the rest of their regular season games. They go to the ACC championship game, and they lose to Miami by 3.
Yep.
Just a good game where either team could have won, which then gives them their second loss, and both of their losses would be to conference champions, and their win over Louisville presumably would be a top 20 win at the end of the year. What if they're compared directly with Indiana, who's a one-loss team with no quality wins? Like, are we 100% sure that the ACC is a one big league right now?
No.
Would you bet your life on that right now? Because I wouldn't.
Absolutely would not.
So, like, yeah, like, I understand what he's saying, but the Big Ten, like, Indiana hasn't been given any favors either. So, like, we are brand problem, but I don't know if it's a conference problem.
Yeah.
Just you can take the hat off now, but that's just what I'm thinking.
No, I think you're probably right. And I don't think we know. I don't think we can make any definitive statements right now, but we will get more context, and Ward Manuel is going to have to answer questions in the next few weeks. But the fact of the matter is only one of those rankings will count.
College football sickos, make sure you're subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. Also want to make sure y'all know the Hard Count brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Playing with Prize Picks using code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups gets you $50 in promo funds. So appreciate y'all using that code and appreciate you being subscribed.